Okay, remember that they're changing my voice. Now, I have 23 witnesses on record, or is it 24? It's up there somewhere. And they're witnesses to various aspects of this targeting, including the fuming and the covert drugging. So it's important to note that as hard as it is for some of you to believe, America is full of hate groups and they overlap with law enforcement. And in recent years, it seems that they came to a head, though my personal belief on it is that it's always been a country run by groups like Freemasons and other groups and hate groups and what have you that have vested interests, in their minds at least, in doing horrible things to people. And there's all kinds of horrible stuff that goes on behind the scenes. I mean, you look at the history of fraternities in this country, the golden age of fraternities, for example, the history of the Odd Fellows, Knights of Malta, Freemasons, Pilgrim Society, what have you. It's pretty straightforward that there's a bunch of groups out there that have many, many members. They have an agenda that they don't put front and center. When's the last time you've heard the Freemasons come out and say this is their plan for America? Though how many presidents have been Freemasons? So it's not some conspiracy theory. It's just straightforward. We know that there's groups that are manipulating things behind the scenes. There's corporate groups, political groups, there's social clubs, there's so-called secret societies. And again, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I deal in the facts. I tell the true story of things, and I explain it in a way that it makes it clear. But before I even started making videos in 2009, I was targeted. I was targeted for various reasons. One reason is there's a religious reasons, and they're a little harder to believe, so I'm going to just avoid that in this video, okay? If you want to see more about that, see the Proof I Am Christ playlist, and you'll be surprised that I've actually proven that I'm the idea that Christ is superimposed on, and the churches and the mosques, the synagogues, the various religions we have here and philosophies, they basically, by their actions, have conceded the point. Some people have flat out conceded the point. They said, yes, it makes sense. Yes, you are Christ. The Christos, the Anointed One. I've shown how the miracles are figurative. I've connected John 1:1 to John 16:25, and I've shown you how the narrative of the Bible is really more figurative than people think it is, and so on and so forth. So there's that. And there's people who have seen it this way the whole time. It's in their wordplay, right? The Kuro Obi Black Belt wordplay, which points to my tribe. Obi in Igbo means King Hardhat Edson Center Temple Core. The word Chi is an Igbo word first, and at some point it found its way to Asia, where the Chinese and Japanese and other groups, Koreans, they talk about this idea in various groups and martial art institutions and groups and so on and so forth. And the Chi in the Igbo means, the person's kind of spirit, okay, his guiding spirit, and the great Chi is God, also known as Chiuku, meaning, Chiuku turns into Chuku, which means, and of course I don't speak it in their accent, which means the big Chi, the great Chi, the source Chi, God, okay, and Eri is his son. And there's a long story about that. I don't want to get into this stuff because it might confuse the bottom line about what's going on here, and I want to make sure you understand these things as we're nearing the end by the looks of it, okay? They've been stepping up on me in recent days, and there's a lot of black vehicles. There's been a lot of fuming going on, heavy fuming. I've suffered a lot of physical ailments, okay? And this has been going on for so long that I have every reason to believe that the end should be coming soon. Okay. I've proven that there's an overwhelming amount of evidence that they are working with corporations to use technologies to try to interfere with my cognitive processes, okay, and to cause me neurological impairment so they can kind of try to control me while they try to make it seem like they're magically superior or something. That is very much their goal. In fact, recently, in the news, we saw a lot of Israelis making rioting, screaming about how they're superior in regards to the military base they've broken into in Israel, trying to free the soldiers who were accused of, 9 soldiers who were accused of gang raping an inmate there. And they're basically saying they can do what they want, and that extends here to America and the world, right, where you see various white Jewish, and LGBT groups working together to promote their alliance with Israel is part of it, but it's really just global oppression. Again, I'm not on, and I've said this many, many times, I have an official stance video, official stance. I went as far as to say, hey, this is my official stance on Palestine, that I'm not on either side, but the Palestinians are more in the right, and I'm not going to offer them at either side any support. Okay. And obviously, even if my videos had a billion views, whatever the kind of sentiments of society would hardly be changed, and it wouldn't matter if they were significantly changed, because the people don't really rule the government. They've made a bunch of protests, and it hasn't gotten them anywhere. So if even those twice as many protests, it wouldn't change the policy of the state. So there's no pressing need to persecute me. And of course, they're provocations. Again, provocations and military-grade persecution. These are military-grade provocations, mind you, designed to ruin my life, to create chaos in my life, and to get me to do things that are rash. And you also must note that, on a side note, you have to note that there are countless people on parole for violent felonies, countless gang members out there, countless human traffickers. There's a police shortage in LA and in other places, San Francisco, Oakland, what have you. Why are they allocating resources to persecute me and to provoke me? Okay? They're not supposed to be doing that. I'm clearly in the right, and many, many people have conceded that I'm clearly in the right, and they're clearly in the wrong. And I made thousands of videos since I've started being targeted in the way that they've been targeting me after a certain point, because the targeting really goes back to when I was young. Hate groups and government groups and political groups, military groups were harassing me as a child in various locations, Montessori school, Cardin school, what have you. Okay? It kind of died down a little bit at country school, but they sent people there too at some point. There's one person named James was a very suspicious character. I'll say, that I strongly suspect that he was one of them. But in some cases, it was clear cut that they were trying to keep me from looking good in the community, which has no practical application. It's a very petty thing. It's something very much associated with Greek fraternities, right? Because they're associated with the Greek deities who are described in the Hercules series, for example, as petty and cruel. So you have to understand what's going on here, right? When you look at this, there's nothing crazy about this video. It is factual. It is logical, okay? And the overwhelming amount of evidence that I've posted, the witnesses, it supports my argument. And as we look for a reason that this is occurring, the reasons we get are consistent with the reasons I've been saying for years now. So again, they've been provoking me and harassing me and trying to get me on psych meds since I was about 13 years old. Clearly, they were trying to get me on psych meds, but they were persecuting me my whole life. Okay, since I was young enough to remember, they were persecuting me as groups. This was more than just me clashing with a bully at school. This was organized persecution. That pattern of persecution continues throughout my life. And during the 80s or whatever it was, there was a satanic ritual abuse scare, and I'm thinking that's a disinformation campaign, and it's based on whatever they're doing here. And I would say, yeah, it is. If you're a religious, so I ran out of memory. If you're a religious person, it is a satanic process, no matter how you slice it by definition. I'm someone who deals in facts. When the countless people who conceded that I'm either Christ or the idea that Christ is superimposed on in the end of the Bible conceded, they didn't do so because of some magic or miraculous miracle. They did so because of the facts, okay, because of the history, because of the martial art argument that's legal and peaceful, that offers $60,000 if I don't get compensated, up to $10 million if I do, and they pay nothing if you lose, $50 is the show. They did because of the Kuro Obi wordplay. They did so because of the countless amounts of evidence that I've presented over the years. And I have several playlists over the years that explain to you why that it's irrefutable that I'm Christ. And no one has ever presented a viable counter-argument. I've been arguing this, I want to say since 2021, but maybe it's later than that. Maybe it's before that. Somewhere at least since 2021, we'll say. Okay. And that's 3 years. 3 years and 8 months. So we'll say the beginning of 2021 by then. And before that, I was arguing in 2017 that I'm the most righteous person and that I should be in charge. And so when we see their lack of a counter argument for years and years and years, it's clear. Also, it's important to note, that I've been persecuted for almost 40 years. When is it enough, right? There was no viable goal for them to do. Okay, they're supposed to separate church and state. They're not supposed to try to coerce me into joining a church or, somehow, quote unquote, blessing them. Like, people have told me that the word bless is a play on words for be less, and it makes sense. So when I get this wordplay stuff, I started off getting it from someone else to a certain degree. And there's many, many people who believe that the wordplay is sound. Okay, so you see, I deal in the facts and evidence that is corroborated, that is proven, that is open and shut. Okay, and that's a long story. I want to wrap this up soon. So there's that. Also, I want to end this by saying that it wouldn't make sense for me to do a fucking terrorist attack or something like that, right? Some crazy stuff like that. Why? Because I have thousands of videos on the internet that I scramble to try to make sure that they stay up. It's not my divine goal to make sure my videos stay up, but I gotta try my best to make sure that they stay up, right? So it would be stupid for me to do something that would compromise that. And we see that these terrorist attacks often cause people's, if not always, for their accounts to be taken down, okay? And I didn't spend the last 15 years of my life making, over 15,000 videos, right? At some point, I'm making over 1,000 videos a year. When I first started, I was making less than 1,000 videos. It kind of averages out to around 15,000, okay? And a lot of it has evidence that they're persecuting me, evidence that should be able to give me millions of dollars in court, right? Just to have them taken down. And I don't believe in trying to send a message, an illogical and senseless message with violence. And on top of that, I'm being watched all the time. So there is no logical terrorist threat here. They're not doing this to keep America safe. By keeping me from my rightful place as the son of two doctors, one a brain surgeon and a humanitarian, they're keeping a humanitarian's namesake, who's the most righteous person logically that ever lived, okay, from rising to fame and convincing people to turn from crime. Okay, there's never been a more powerful reason for people to not be criminals and to not be thieves than my life story, than my arguments, than my culture, and my war on poverty plan, which is guaranteed to end homelessness, okay, to reduce crime, and to feed the hungry, and more. So as we look at this thing, it's clear cut that you couldn't possibly be more in the right if you tried. I am in the right, and my opinion and my truths are number one. Who's going to argue with me, right? Some politician? Some person in a corrupt church? Who could disagree with me? They do not have the moral high ground. I do. And the gap is infinite. Look at the martial art challenge. Focus, moral intensity. The path of the righteous like the morning sun, shining ever brighter to the full light of day. Shining brighter. Intensity. Okay, the throne is established in righteousness. Proverbs 16:12, and I just brought up a Proverbs 4:18, I believe it is. No one has anywhere near the moral high ground as much as I do. And no one's owed more by the American government more than I am. Okay? So if I die, know for sure. If I die anytime soon, know for sure they killed me. It could be, dying in a car accident. It could be dying mysteriously, being poisoned, overdosing or whatever, right? I don't do any drugs. It could be, falling from a high building or something. And no matter what it is, know that they calculated that end. Okay? And know that whether or not they get convicted after the fact, that's peanuts. That the damage will be so extreme to this nation and to the offspring of this people, of Americans, and to this planet, because they'll have turned their back on the most righteous person that ever lived, which is tantamount to turning their backs on God himself by turning their backs on the gate, on the Christos, on the anointed, the one who's established the throne in righteousness. Okay? And they'll have done the greatest evil and harm to the world, especially to American people. 9/11 and all the terrorist attacks that ever occurred will have nothing on what the consequences will be. Spiritually, morally, the human consequences. When they finally finish screening me out, they should stop immediately and compensate me. They should stop immediately, admit what they've done, and compensate me. Let's face it, if the gang stalking program is exposed, People in America aren't going to say, oh my gosh, because we've seen the MK Ultra. We've seen Project Naomi and Artichoke. We've seen COINTELPRO, okay? We've seen countless psyops before. We're not surprised. If someone, LAPD officer, gets convicted of beating up a minority, the whole world isn't going to riot or something. The government is going to collapse, okay? They should admit what they're doing, and they should stop. And should stop being petty and cruel. It's been 40 years plus. Maybe it started when I was in the womb. I don't know. But it's been at least 40 years since I've been targeted. The last 13, significantly more than before. And the last maybe 7 or so after they blinded me in 2017, to the extreme. When is it enough? When is it too much? When do you realize that it's the biggest mistake possible? When do you realize that it doesn't make you a man to try to control me? That is the anti-man when you try to control me.